Formula 1 Championship Edition for PlayStation 3 is the best incarnation of the game that we've ever released.
Millions of people watch Formula 1 on TV. They want to see in the game what they see on the TVs every week.
PlayStation 3 Formula 1 Championship Edition is probably the best, closest racing, wheel-to-wheel racing that we've done so far in the studio.
This is a minute-to-minute, second-by-second active race.
Creating a launch title for PlayStation 3 has given everybody on the team and everybody involved with it a huge boost, and has been a great honor to be working on PlayStation 3 early on in its life cycle, and being one of the titles that are probably going to be remembered, being one of the reasons for people picking up a PlayStation 3 when it comes out.
F1 pedigree here has run exclusively for 5 years now, but the PS3 one is a huge step above any other version we've ever done.
Our rough guide was that it was to be 10 times the resolution of the PS2 version. So that's 10 times the polygon count, 10 times the texture space. So there's a huge amount of complexity that goes into every aspect of the game.
For the memory we allocate for one car is actually slightly larger on the PS3 than it is for all 22 cars on the PS2.
We had to rethink how we actually designed the system architecture for Formula 1 to work on the PlayStation 3. And this threw up some interesting new gameplay features. We could really accurately model a Formula 1 car. So when you go into a corner on the PlayStation 3 version of the game, you can have two wheels interlocking between an AI car and a player car.
In order to get realistic reflections, you need to render the entire scene with all that complicated geometry, with all those textures, and then composite that onto the image of the car. On PlayStation 3 we can do that, and it means that we can get really realistic looking graphics, which means it's really immersive for the player.
There will be signposts or little generators next to the track, huge amounts of things which we could never put in, we just didn't have the polygonal power. But on PS3 all those kind of elements can be in there.
For the PlayStation 3 we worked even closer with the teams and the actual people who build the tracks to get the data into the game. So for instance, on the actual Malaysian Grand Prix in the grandstands, the in-game model has the correct number of seats modelled to the actual real-world sort of counterpart stadium.
We went to Japan and Bahrain with a company from Canada who scan human faces. Basically, they did some work in the movies, they did some work for The Matrix. They went over with us and we were able to get all the drivers to sit down, and we shone lasers into their eyes and scanned their faces perfectly.
We really put a lot of effort into trying to get the atmosphere of trying to drive in the wet. It must be a very, very scary experience to do it in real life. I think we've captured some of the real visibility problems.
In terms of damage, we looked at a lot of research and the actual Grand Prix themselves, the crashes that take place, the spectacular damage that you see in a Grand Prix when a car goes off into a barrier. Each piece has its own sort of dynamics and physics properties, so you can be behind a crash and a wing will come out of a car in front of you, and you'll be able to hit that wing and interact with it, and it will bounces off the scenery as it should do.
Great graphics are what is the most immediately obvious part of any PlayStation 3 game, but we felt the playability was a key factor in ensuring that people felt it's a title that they get a lot of enjoyment out of.
We have a kind of saying in the office of Formula Everyone. We want the game to be sort of accessible to every player.
The assists that we've put into the game, from steering assists to braking assists and stability control, really have resulted in players of all ages and with all kind of backgrounds being able to pick up the controller and on the easiest setting might even be able to snatch a point, or who knows, maybe even a podium on their first attempt.
We can have 22 cars online with AI, with full collision, full physics, and the PS3 can handle that. That's a real difference for a racing game.
The reason we've included sort of AI cars in a network game is so that people can join a lobby game, see the game that's already halfway through, and hit the late join button and just jump into an AI car and start driving.
The player can basically, drive behind certain AI cars at certain points in the World Championship, and they will make mistakes, they will go wide on corners, they will react to an engine blowout in front of them in different ways.
We also support the motion sensing functionality of the 6-axis controller, which means you can use the tilt sensitivity of the controller to actually steer the car.
You can basically hold the joypad out in front of you using the triggers for accelerate and brake, and then steer the car like a steering wheel but in free air. The sound is one of the most impressive features of the whole game. It's completely come to life in 5.1 Dolby Digital. If you take something like Occlusions, where, you know, if you're stood one side of a building and a car goes past several buildings, you'll hear the loud gaps in between them, and that's all calculated by the cell. When you also bear in mind there's 22 cars here doing this, it's an extremely complicated task to position those all in 3D correctly around you and get the right sound out of it. It brings the whole thing to life. It sounds very, very realistic.
F1 for PlayStation 3 is one of the first F1 games in recent times that's going to get a release, not just in Europe and Japan, but also in America. And so we've created a global, what we hope to be a global hit, and something that hopefully will do very, very well for us. And it really is a showcase title for PlayStation 3.